Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Today we are going to talk about and rank the subclasses for the Kineticist class. As usual with these, if you haven't watched one before, then here's your new information. If you have, sorry we keep doing this, but I do it in case people haven't seen these videos before. We're going to talk quickly about how I rank these subclasses, so feel free to skip this part if you've seen it before. On screen is my criteria for ranking the subclasses. This is going to be a ranking from S to D. S, this is a subclass that is mechanically stronger, especially in combat, than other subclasses, while not falling behind in the other pillars of play. It's strong enough that it becomes almost like a default choice or the right way to play the class. I say Pathfinder 2nd Edition largely avoids this problem, but of course it can come up, and I just want to bring it up here as S is really just not where I want things to land. A is much better. What is A? A is going to be strong in combat and out of combat in any adventure. It's not only strong on its own, but it makes the team better as well, because Pathfinder is a cooperative team-based game, and subclasses should take advantage of that. Also, this subclass leans into the strengths of the class, including any social or exploration that the class naturally lends itself to. B, this is a subclass that is mechanically strong on its own or does a good job of boosting up the party, but usually not both. It may be especially strong in certain campaigns, but not in others, and it may also land here just because it doesn't do a great job of leaning into what the class is best at. C is a class that lands here because it's not amazing in combat in any campaign, or at least it's no better than just the base class without a subclass. It might not take advantage of the specialty of the class, or doesn't succeed in any particular pillar of play besides combat, and even that is questionable. D is a subclass you want to avoid. This is what I consider a trap subclass, where what it offers you might sound good on paper, and then in play it's just not going to work out, or honestly it just might sound cool from a roleplay perspective, but then if you actually go to play it, you're going to find yourself lacking compared to everybody else, and it can even sometimes take away from what the class is already good at. So if you see a D, I definitely recommend reconsidering if you're going to play that subclass. Fantastic, let's go ahead and jump into the Kineticist subclasses then. With Kineticist, we have 6 subclasses to rank. These are referred to in the class as the gates, and those are air, earth, fire, water, metal, and wood. I'll walk through each gate, discuss its strengths, its combat and counter play style, benefits versus the other pillars, or versus the other gates, and then benefits in the pillars of play. What I want to make clear here is that I'm going to rank them as if you're going to take the gate at level 1 as a single gate, because of course you can take 2 gates at level 1, and I'm going to consider them on their own. So while you will almost certainly end up with a stronger or more flexible character if you take more than 1 gate over time, we're going to talk about straight single gating all the way down. So with that, what are the benefits we get from any gate? Well, we get an elemental blast. This is a primary attack that you're going to use using either 1 or 2 actions, and you get 1 to 2 damage types to choose from. That's all 2 damage types to choose from except for one of the gates. It will have either a range of 30 or 60 feet and do 1d6 or 1d8 damage with the damage die. Then you have an impulse junction. This is a passive boost you get when you use impulses that you're going to get for free if you go single gate. So we'll talk about that considering we're talking about single gates. Or you can take it later at levels 5, 9, 13, etc. If you choose to expand a gate, you can take its impulse junction. The other things you get that are possible to take but you don't get for free at level 1 are your critical blast. This is what happens when you get a crit with your elemental blast. There is an elemental resistance where you gain resistance equal to your level against all creatures and effects that match the traits that are listed by the elemental resistance. And then at level 17, you become immune to effects, just not to the creatures themselves, that have that same trait or traits. Then there's an aura junction. This is an added effect for having your kinetic aura active, just anytime it's active, which is all the time pretty much, unless you've done an overflow. Then a skill junction. This is a skill and a skill feat that you get at level whenever you take it. And not only do you get that skill, but you get a +1 bonus to anytime you use that skill to checks with it. And then that goes to a +2 at level 10 and a +3 at level 17. So it can be a skill that you get really good at, even though there are no skills that are tied to the primary ability score for the class. And again, while all these things are actually very critical for evaluating the gates against each other, it is important to note that those last 4 I talked about, You can only take starting at level 5 at the earliest if you stay single gate. So 5, 9, 13, 17. Then you can start taking those. You will not get them before then because they're just not available to you until that time. Finally, what each one gives you are feats. Most of the feats in the class are tied to gates. There are 4 feats at level 1, and this is for each gate. So 4 feats at level 1, 2 at level 4, 2 at level 6, 2 at 8, 2 at 12, 1 at 14, and 2 at 18. And yes, we are going to talk about them all because that's what I need to do to properly evaluate each gate. We're going to be here for a little while. Strap in. There are composite feats, by the way. This is where you take 2 gates. So let's say Earth and Fire. Earth and Fire will have 1 composite impulse that you could take with a feat at either level 4 or 6. There's 1 feat exactly for every pair of gates. I am not going to put that in as part of my ranking. I'm not going to evaluate based on that. There's a chance I might bring them up. I know there's at least 1 I'm going to bring up because I think it's great. But because we're talking about single gate ranking here, those do not play into it. Also, as we talk, keep in mind that overflow is a big deal. When you overflow, you lose your aura temporarily. You have to use then 1 action to use channel elements, which allows you for 1 action to get your aura going again, but also lets you do a 1 action blast or a 1 action stance for free. So there's a cost to it. You can't just constantly use 3 action overflows again and again every turn. Just keep that in the back of your mind as we do talk about them, as every single class has overflow impulses. All right, we're going to do this alphabetically. So we're going to start with air. Your elemental blast has a range of 60 feet and a damage die of 1d6, doing electricity or slashing damage. By the way, I'm going to move fast through some of the stuff I talked about in my last video, but some of it I'll even linger a little bit on because I think it's really important when I want to rank these. Impulse junction. Before or after any impulse you use that has the air trait, you get to move up to half your speed for free, or you can step for free. And if you're flying, you get to fly half your fly speed for free. This is insane. The amount of movement you get, because it's every impulse you use, and everything you're doing as a kineticist is an impulse. You may be doing 2 impulses on the same turn. That means twice you get to move for half your speed. You're getting your full speed, potentially, ignoring rounding, of course. You're going to move all the time without having to spend any actions on movement. Having an air kineticist in one of my games, I can say this character moves around constantly for free. And this is huge. I cannot oversell how good this is. The gate junctions you can take, your critical blast gives you a push of 10 feet against the target. Your elemental resistance is against electricity and air. Your aura junction, you and allies get a plus 10 land or fly speed bonus if they started the turn in your aura, just adding to your speed already. And your skill junction is stealth with the experienced smuggler skill feat. So what are our feats? Well, let's start with our level 1 feats. We've got aerial boomerang. You're going to throw out a boomerang in a straight line. Any creature in there has to make a basic reflex save against 2d4 slashing damage, where it's going to sit. And then on your next turn, you can pull it back to you. No matter where you are, it'll come in a straight line from where it's sat back to you. And again, creatures have to make a save, same save. This does go up by 1d4 every 2 character levels, so not a ton of damage. Kind of an interesting one, could be very cool with some nice positioning, but it takes some thought and it's not high damage. Air cushion, this is a reaction. You slow a creature's descent by 60 feet per turn, and they're going to end up landing safely on the ground when they do land. The target creature has to be within 60 feet of you when you use it, but it's a nice way to save people if you're in a campaign where people are going to be falling a lot. 4 wins. This is 2 actions. You target 4 creatures within 30 feet, and they all get to stride half their speed. And this is land or air. This is not a reaction on their part either. They just get to do this. It's just, yes, you're using 2 actions, but you get to reposition the entire team, which can be extraordinarily strong in the right setups, especially when you've got team members coming right after you in order. Whisper on the Wind, our last level 1. This takes 1 action. You basically get a modified version of the sending spell, letting you speak to somebody within 500 feet without other people knowing that you're doing it, and without having to be anywhere near them. So it's just a silent thing to everybody else. It's almost like telepathy, but it's not. All right, jumping up to level 4, we have a 1 action stance, Air Shroud. Your aura gives ranged attacks -1 penalty to hit, and it's difficult terrain for flying creatures. So this is to slow enemies down or make them worse. Flying enemies will certainly happen. I don't know that they're going to be huge in every campaign. Ranged attacks, though, are far more common, so anybody shooting arrows at you is going to have a worse chance to hit you or any allies in your aura. Lightning Dash, level 4, 2 actions, Overflow. You surge through creatures as lightning in a 30-foot line. Any creature you pass through makes a basic reflex save against 2d12 electricity damage. This increases by a d12 and 5 feet of distance every 3 character levels. That's not terrible increases. A d12 is a lot of damage. The thing to keep in mind with this one is you just surge through creatures. This is not only damage, this is repositioning. I have seen everybody who takes air take this one because it's just incredible at doing damage and repositioning yourself. All right, clear as air, level 6 now, 2 actions overflow. You become invisible until the end of your next turn. You do become visible if you take any hostile actions, and you can sustain this to keep the invisibility going as long as you want to stay invisible up to a certain duration. If used again within the next 10 minutes, you just become concealed though instead of invisible. And at higher levels, meaning at 10 to 16, this does get improved to eventually be where you can just stay invisible while you're doing your other actions, which is fantastic. Flinging Updraft. Level 6, 2 actions. Choose a creature within 60 feet to have it leap up to 30 feet in any direction. Again, no reaction used here. This is just straight repositioning. If it doesn't end up on solid ground, it gets to safely fall to the ground below. If you target an enemy, it gets a reflex save. On a failure, you jump it up to half the distance, so 15 feet by default, only using the entire distance on a crit fail. However, the max distance that this can move people increases by 15 feet every 2 levels. That is an insane distance. By high levels, you can have allies move across the map for just 2 actions. And enemies, you can throw them off of anything on a failure and a crit failure. This is both incredible as a support tool and a control tool. Cyclonic Ascent, level 8, 2 actions. You gain a fly speed of 30 feet or your land speed, whichever one's faster. The flight doesn't even treat going straight up as difficult terrain, so it's the best kind of flight. Starting at level 14, you can give this to 5 more creatures. Though they don't get the ignoring difficult terrain flying straight up thing, still, you can just make the whole party fly at level 14 for 2 actions. That's really nice. Storm Spiral, level 8, 3 actions overflow. You conjure a storm of a 20-foot burst within 60 feet. All creatures in the storm make a basic reflex save against 3d12 electricity and 1d10 sonic. Decent damage there. It's nice to have 2 separate types of damage as well. A creature that fails the save is deafened until the end of its next turn, or 1 minute on a crit fail. Remember that being deafened actually hurts your chance to cast spells. Creatures wearing metal armor or who are made of metal get a -1 penalty to the save, and this damage does increase by a d12 electricity damage, so the sonic never goes up, every 3 levels. Honestly, this is a pretty decent AoE damage drop. Ghosts in the Storm. Level 12, 1 action, and this is another stance, so it'll affect your aura. You and all allies in your aura gain +2 status bonus to reflex saves and acrobatics checks. Also, anyone affected by the aura that uses a move action is concealed and have their attacks gain the shock rune until the start of their next turn. So this is a very nice boost to allies in your aura, and it's just your allies. So if there's enemies in the aura, they're not going to get any of these boosts. But man, this could be great, especially since a lot of saves are reflex saves. Wiles on the Wind, level 12, 2 actions. You create an illusory sound originating from some square within 500 feet. So you have a massive play space. Any creatures of your choice within 40 feet of that illusion, or that come within 40 feet of that illusion at any point, will have to make a will save. This is a mental effect. On a failure, the creature becomes fascinated by the sound until the end of its next turn, which is 1 minute on a crit fail. Regardless, after the save and the effects, the creature is immune to 1 hour. So even if they succeed at the save or fail, doesn't matter, they're immune for 1 hour. This illusion lasts until the end of your next turn unless you sustain it. Now, fascination is pretty weak, so that doesn't make this amazing, but it's something to think about if you're looking for a way to kind of do some minimal control. Body of Air, level 14, 2 actions, or a reaction. This has overflow. You get the effects of the Vapor Form spell, which you'll see on screen here. Basically, a defensive state where you are vapor. This ends at the end of your next turn unless you sustain it, which you can up to 5 minutes. If you ever channel elements, though, you turn it off. So you overflow, which means your aura is down, and your aura stays down as long as you keep this going. You can trigger this when you are targeted by an attack or damage effect from a creature that you can see simply by a reaction, or you can use it as a 2-action activity. Crowned in Tempest's Fury. Level 18, 1 action, and a stance, which is going to be rare for level 18, by the way. Any creature that enters or ends its turn in your aura takes 2d12 electricity damage. No save. This is just, you just take it. You gain a 20-foot fly speed or the fly speed of Cyclonic Ascent, which we talked about from level 8, if you have that feat. You gain a 10-foot status bonus to all speeds, so even if you took just the speed from here, you're at 30 now. Your Elemental Blast does an extra 1d12 electricity damage. So this is just all about buffing yourself, doing a little damage to those creatures who get nearby. It's cool. I don't think it's the ultimate level 18 feat though, but it's nice. And then we have Infinite Expanse of the Bluest Heaven. This is level 18, 3 actions, and an overflow, but you create a 20-foot burst within 100 feet of you. Any creature in it, or any that enters, makes a will save and on a failure believes they are falling infinitely through the air. They try to flee each round, but if they fail at a flat check, they remain stuck inside no matter what they do, essentially swimming around in the illusion as long as it's going. So this is a very, very cool control tool. Now they can only be affected once within every hour, but still, that's very strong. The Air Elemental Blast lends itself to ranged combat, which is good, because this really isn't the most defensive gate. The Impulse Junction is absolutely nuts. The movement seriously is crazy, and again, leans into that let's keep away kind of feel. I've seen it in action for a while, and the movement just adds up to where you just can't keep up with somebody who's got this. The Gate Aura Junction is amazing for allies who might reasonably pass through your aura, which, given a few of the auras, feels like you might want to gain several and have allies start in your aura. The other gate junctions are nothing to write home about. As for the feats, there are a good mix of support and control, including some of the best control in my opinion, and survivability, but this isn't your damage gate. There are very few AoE damage options, there's really just one that stands out, and just a single late game aura stance to improve your single target damage. Not that other gates really get single target damage boosts either, but we'll get to that. Thankfully, the one true AoE damage impulse does hit decently hard. All things considered, I do think the gate earns a B for me. You can aid the team very effectively, both offensively and defensively, both in and out of combat. The biggest issue I have with the class is that most of the level 1 feats just won't feel strong. Basically, until level 4, you might feel like you aren't very effective in combat, but you will allow your allies to succeed, meaning you can move them around, or you can save them from certain scenarios, more than you get out of just like your Elemental Blast or things like that. Lightning Dash, though, is a huge boost at level 4. It's a massive take that, again, I see lots and lots of Kineticists like. Overall, this is a very well-rounded gate, though, and a solid starter for any single gate. I just wouldn't dedicate to it as the only thing I do. I'd probably take a second gate later on. I mentioned at the beginning that composite feats won't play into my rankings, and they haven't. That B is a standalone. But I wanted to highlight one very particular composite impulse, which is a combination of air and water, because I just think it's so incredible it deserves mention in this video, and that is Rising Hurricane. This is an AoE damage and control impulse that is stronger than it looks like on face value. So it's a 30-foot diameter, 40-foot high cylinder, and all creatures have to make a basic fortitude save against 2d6 damage. That damage is basically irrelevant though, because what you really hear is for the failure effect. On a failure, any creature that fails, you can lift to any height in the cylinder, which means even if you had allies, and there's a great feat to take so that you don't have to target allies with area stuff, but anyway, even if you hit them, you get to choose how far a failed creature moves, anywhere from no height at all to the very top of the cylinder, and you get to move them 5 feet horizontally and then drop them. This means that even if you target allies alongside enemies and the your allies fail, they're just going to take 2d6 damage and then you don't lift them. Fine. The enemies, though, they're going to be taken 40 feet in the air, then move 5 feet, potentially into bad locations. Even if they're not, they're going to fall immediately. This is going to take 20 damage because you take half the distance as fall damage in this game. There's no stopping it, and they're going to be prone immediately afterward unless they can fly. So again, the only time that you won't hurt somebody is if they have a flying speed. That is amazing. And this is at level 6. So you're doing 2d6 plus 20 damage at level 6 against a creature that fails. That's an average of 27 damage. That's more than a 3rd level fireball. We're at a 4th level fireball. And knocking them prone is just to cap things off. So now you've got everybody prone as well that's in this area, and it's a decent size. A 30-foot diameter is nothing to laugh at. Also, the initial damage increases by a d6, and the height increases by 5 feet every 3 levels. So as you go up, you're just going to get them throw them higher in the air. They're going to fall farther, take more damage. This is just such an incredible feat. I just wanted to point it out. Because if anybody's thinking about going air out there and like, I don't know if what I want for my second one, water's not a bad choice just for this impulse alone. Anyway, not in the rankings. I just love it. There you go. I went on my little tirade. Back to the video. As you can already see, the video is going to take a while. All right, let's keep rolling with Earth. Elemental Blast, range 30 feet, deals 1d8 bludgeoning or piercing damage. Your Impulse Junction is that you get +1 to your AC until the start of your next turn. Really nice, straight defensive. Gate Junctions, Critical Blast. Your crits knock the opponent prone if they're on ground. If they're not on ground, meaning they're flying, they descend 20 feet. Both of these are awesome. Your Elemental Resistance is Earth and Poison. Your Aura Junction, squares in the aura are difficult terrain for anybody trying to get away from you, which sounds weird, but I promise it makes a lot of sense with the rest of this gate. Skill Junction, Athletics and Hefty Hauler. Again, Athletics really fits well with this gate, so a lot of these fit well with the gate. Feats, Armor and Earth. Level 1, 1 action. You get to cover yourself in earthen plate-like armor, giving you +4 to AC. You get 1 from your dexterity bonus, and it has a +3 strength requirement with a -10 to your speed. So you're still going to have a -5 even if you meet the strength requirement. You're going to want to meet the strength requirement if you're taking Earth. This is amazing defense. Lasts for 10 minutes or until you dismiss it. The AC goes up by 1 to a maximum of 5 AC with +1 dex still at level 3, and it gains Bulwark, which is incredible. This is straight up full plate with all the plate bonuses at level 3. So good. Geologic Attunement, level 1, 1 action. You get an imprecise tremor sense in your aura. You can even point out a creature within your aura as a free action each turn. This becomes precise, however, at 13th level. Now keep in mind, your aura is only 10 feet at level 1. You can expand it to 20 feet with a feat later on. It's not a specific feat to a gate, it's just anybody can. So something to keep in mind if you want to go that route. Stepping Stones, level 1, 2 actions. You create stones that you can cross. These can be 20 feet long or 10 feet horizontally or go up an angle up a wall. They have to be attached to something though. These can make convenient steps allowing you to traverse all sorts of hazard and deal with all sorts of environmental problems just out the gate at level 1. You do have to sustain these, but if you're using this outside of combat, that's really not an issue. Tremor, level 1, 2 actions, Overflow. Create a 10-foot burst within 30 feet. Creatures make a basic Fortitude save against your Kineticist DC or take 1d8 damage. So it's basic, so 1d8 on a fail. Crit fails, they also get knocked prone along with the double damage. So you definitely want that crit if you can get it, because knocking prone is great. All right, up to level 4 with Calcifying Sand. This is a reaction and has Overflow. When a creature damages you in melee with a physical attack, you gain resistance to the damage of the attack equal to your level and force the attacker to make a Fortitude save. On a failure, the creature is slowed 1 until the end of its next turn, and on a crit fail, it is petrified until the end of its next turn, which is horrifying. The same creature can be affected only once per hour, but that'll be plenty. This is really saying, you really want to get up with me? You're going to pay the price for it. This is one of the best defensive solo melee buffs I can think of across any gate. This is just powerful if you're going to be up there tanking. Igniogenesis, level 4, 2 actions. Basically, you create a permanent or a semi-permanent stone creation that fits in a 5-foot cube. This can be pretty much anything you can think of as long as the GM allows it. It is still made of earth and it's just an object, so you're not going to create living things. If you make another, the first goes back to its default state, probably just sand or a pile of rocks or something. But if you do it as a 1-hour activity outside of combat, you can make it permanent. So you can make permanent structures given enough time. You can make a permanent rock garden or a house. Just take a while. As you increase in level, you can create more squares at a single time, and this can be really great for creative players. Again, maybe you just want at level 14 to make a house for you guys. Maybe you can take a day and just pull that off. All right, level 6, Sand Snatcher, 2 actions. You create a hand of rock and earth. When summoned, it can attempt a grapple against a creature it's next to using your impulse attack. This does count as a flanking object too, and by the way, your grapples do count against your multiple attack penalty. Anyway, you can flank with the creature. Your allies can flank with this creature made of rock. You can sustain it, and if you do, you can grapple again, or you can move it up to 20 feet, making more opportunities for flanking, and then potentially setting up for a new grapple. So this is almost like having a pet on the battlefield, but more limited than that. But it can be great, not only to set up yourself, but allies as well. And grappling creatures, of course, if you know the system, you know is quite good. Weight of Stone, Level 6, 3 actions overflow. You create a 20-foot diameter, 80-foot high cylinder of falling rocks within 120 feet of yourself, which is a good range. All creatures in the area make a basic reflex save against 4d8 bludgeoning damage. On a failure, the creature is pushed downward 40 feet and can't fly. This is how you get flying creatures down to the ground for everybody to wallop on them. They can't fly, levitate, or leave the ground in any way if they fail. You push them down 80 feet on a crit failure. So you just all the way down. You can catch them at the very top of the cylinder and they just plummet down. This is really good against flying enemies. And the damage isn't bad against anything either. 4d8 at level 6 is nothing to write home about, but it's certainly not terrible. Spike Skin, level 8, 2 actions. You give a willing creature, so it doesn't have to be you, resistance 4 to all physical damage except for adamantine, which means pretty much all physical damage unless you're high level. When hit by a physical attack in melee, the attacker takes 2 piercing damage. This buff lasts 10 minutes, but loses a minute every time the creature gets hit by physical damage. The target is immune to receiving it for 1 hour, and you can't have it on more than one character at a time, but still a very useful way to prevent damage for your allies, and you can kind of pass it around as everybody gets their chance to use it. At level 8, resistance 4 to physical is actually pretty solid. And of course, these numbers do go up as you go up in level. Swim Through Earth, level 8, 2 actions. You gain a burrow speed and immediately burrow. Your speed is equal to your land speed, and you have to hold your breath because you can't breathe under the earth, even with this. This lasts until the end of your next turn, but you can sustain it. If it ends for some reason while you're in the earth, you'd immediately surface directly above where you are with some nasty conditions. So you really don't want that to be the case, but at least as a last resort, you could do that. I'd be a little careful about this one, though. All right, up to level 12, Rattle the Earth, 2 actions overflow. You create a smaller, more localized version of the Earthquake spell, which you can see here on screen. This is either in your aura, or you can make it in a 60-foot cone. The Earthquake spell is really about difficult terrain, creating some fissures that characters can fall into, and you can destroy buildings. It's more situational. Earthquake sounds great, but it is actually more situational. Rock Rampart, level 12. 3 actions, overflow. You create a stone wall following a slightly altered version of the Wall of Stone spell, again, shown on screen. It ends at the end of your next turn, but you can sustain it. This is a solid control tool, especially in narrow spaces. This can be really, really useful. One thing I want to bring up real quick is keep in mind, when I say, it's just using the spell like this or whatever, anytime it relates to a spell, keep in mind that while the Kineticist version is usually not as strong, they can use it infinitely. If you're going to create a wall of stone with spell slots, you're going to run out of those spell slots. An Earth Kineticist will never run out of impulses. So just keep that in mind. All right, on to Assume Earth's Mantle. Level 14, 1 action, and it is a stance. So finally, we're going to affect our aura here. This gives you a huge set of buffs. You become large, and you get to increase your reach to 10 feet, which is fantastic because otherwise, there's no great way to increase your reach for your melee strikes outside of a very, very, very critical level 1 feat that you can take for the class that's not tied to any gate. You gain a climb speed equal to your land speed for going up earthen surfaces only, though. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus to fortitude saves and +2 to your fort saves and reflex DCs against shove, trip, and knocking you prone. So the chance of them pulling off good versions of that is going to be pretty low. If your strength modifier is less than 4, it becomes 4. However, if it's 4 or higher, it just increases by 1, which is great if you're going to do anything with athletics and helps add to your melee elemental blasts. If you have armor in earth, this stacks on top of that. So you might have thought, oh, some of this is conflicting with armor in earth. No, just adding it on top of, making you truly a very tanky, solid melee character. Now we're up to our level 18. Rebirth in Living Stone, level 18, 1 action. You gain 40 temporary hit points, become immune to critical hits and persistent damage. You can't be pulled, pushed, or tripped while on earth or stone. Your elemental blasts deal 1d10 extra damage. All of these boosts last until the end of your next turn, but it can be sustained up to a minute. But the temp HP doesn't come back. You can only have that once per 10 minutes. Still, again, we talked about being tanky and being up in the front lines. This is a great thing to add on top of that. And finally, the Shattered Mountain Weeps. Level 18, 3 actions overflow. A sphere of rock explodes in a 20-foot burst within 120 feet. Every creature makes a basic fortitude save against 9d10 bludgeoning damage. They fall prone on a failure. the area becomes difficult terrain. Any creature that ends its turn in the area takes 3d10 extra damage, and at level 20, this goes up to 10d10 and 4d10 damage, respectively. So giving you a decent AoE damage choice because this gate has only had a couple so far. Did you say you wanted to be the Kineticist tank? This is how you do it. This is your Kineticist tank. The Elemental Blast is well set up for melee. You want to take strength anyway for armor and earth, so you're just going to add to that melee Elemental Blast damage. The Impulse Junction of the increased AC means you're going to take fewer hits and fewer crits. Even your Aura Junction makes it so that creatures can't escape you. In fact, between the defensive abilities and control, like things like Calcifying Sand and Sand Snatcher and Rock Rampart, this is just a great setup for a grapple build. While AoE damage isn't the strong suit of the build, and you don't have the most support for your allies, you do have support for your allies, on top of just being able to do pretty much anything else you want to do solo. So you're kind of doing it all together in a solid way, to where this gate, to me, just has to be an A. It lacks some of the support that the other gates have, and you're going to see some later that are very focused on that. Has a fairly dead level at 8, but you could easily stay single gate with Earth and play an incredible tank, single target damage, defensive booster with some AoE damage, and feel really good about yourself. I think one very important distinction between Earth and Air at level 1, which is important because you want to start off strong, is that it feels amazing for Earth. Getting your armor, having the option for AoE, having some traversal powers, it's also very different and diverse, and you can really build a solid level 1 character that you want to do anything with, whereas Air doesn't quite have that. Finally, while we haven't gotten there yet, Armor and Earth is the best of the 3 armor options. There's 2 other gates that have armor options, at least in my opinion. Okay, so we have seen a support heavy gate, we've seen a tanking gate. Where's our big AoE damage gate? Well, you know, because by alphabetical order, it's fire. Your Elemental Blast is a range of 60 feet and does a d6 fire damage. Your Impulse Junction increases the damage die of all fire damage dice for your impulses by 1 size. So even just what we talked about, that d6 Elemental Blast is now a d8. Just keep in mind, whenever we talk about, any dice in any of the things we get to, if you're going single gate, they're going to be increased by 1 size. Your Gate Junction's Critical Blast, it does 1d6 persistent fire damage, plus anything you get from your Gate Attenuator bonuses. That's a very specific item. Don't worry about that for this video. Elemental Resistance is to cold and fire. Your Aura Junction is that enemies in your aura gain a weakness to fire equal to half your level, which is actually really nice. And your Skill Junction is Intimidation with Intimidating Glare, which is an amazing skill junction. Let's get into your feats. At level 1, we've got Burning Jet, 2 actions. You move up to 40 feet in a straight line, ignoring difficult terrain and not triggering reactions. This increases the distance at 6th and 10th levels, but it is just that. You're spending 2 actions to move what is probably slightly less than 2 actions worth of distance. And eventually is more than that, but still. Eternal Torch, level 1, 1 action. You create an unlimited orb of light that creates torch-like heat and light. You can have 4 of these out at a time. Well, really, you get a number equal to your con mod, so 4 at the beginning, then it'll improve, and the light improves at 8th level. So this is just giving you a nice lighting option that nobody has to hold. It'll just float around people, and you can just kind of hand them out to the team. Flying Flame, level 1, 2 actions. You send out a small creature made of fire that goes in a 30-foot, well, it goes in a 30-foot path, let's say. You get to decide what that path looks like and send it through whatever creatures in that distance you want to. Any creature that it goes through must make a dex save against 1d6 fire damage. That goes up by d6 every 2 levels, and any creature can only make the save once per turn. It does let you control it, so you don't have to worry about hitting allies, but it's also fairly weak. Scorching Column, level 1, 3 actions, Overflow. You create a 10-foot radius by 30-foot high column of fire in 60 feet of you. All creatures in there must make a reflex save, a basic reflex save against 1d6 fire damage, and it leaves behind smoldering terrain that deals 1 fire damage for each square that somebody has to pass through. The damage goes up by a d6 for the initial damage and 2 floor damage every 2 levels. Again, that basic initial damage really isn't very high. It doesn't go up by a ton. The area on the ground is all right, but it's a fairly small area. So again, I don't think this is amazing. Blazing Wave. We're at level 4 now. 2 actions, Overflow. All creatures in a 30-foot cone must make a basic reflex save against 4d6 fire damage. On a crit fail, the creature falls prone also. The damage goes up by a d6 every 2 levels. Okay, so at least this is okay initial damage. 4d6 is not bad for level 4, so nice there. And of course, it's 48 if you're single gating it. So that's not too bad either. Thermal Nimbus. Level 4, 1 action and a stance. You choose fire or cold, and all allies gain resistance to your level to that, whichever you chose, that element. Every creature that starts its turn, however, in the aura, this is allies or enemies, take damage on their turn equal to half your level, which means it's okay for allies to be in there because they will fully resist the damage. Fantastic. The resistance that you hand out to allies is cumulative with any other junction aura or anything else you've got. And then the other thing to keep in mind is if you have the aura junction, enemies are already having a weakness equal to half your level, plus now you're dealing half your level of damage. You're doing basically full level of damage to them of fire damage if you chose that option, which is very cool. Crawling Fire, level 6, 2 actions. You create a small creature of flame within 30 feet of yourself. You can sense what it senses. You can have your fire impulses come from it rather than from you. It lasts until the end of your next turn unless you sustain it, which you can up to a minute. Each time you sustain it, it can move up to 40 feet. It shares your defensive stats, except it's immune to fire, and if it takes damage instead, you take that damage. If you upcast it, the size options do increase. I'm not sure how that helps, but you could potentially do that. Volcanic Escape, level 6, reaction, and has overflow. When an enemy in your aura damages you, you can leap up to half your speed in any direction, not triggering reactions. The triggering creature also takes 1d6 fire damage with a basic reflex save, and that goes up by d6 every 4 levels, so it's never going to be damage that matters. The escape is helpful, but you're not even going that far. At least it is something to, take off with, though, so it never hurts to have a way to get away. It hurts that it's overflow, though, on a reaction like that. Kindle Inner Flame, level 8, 1 action, stance. You and all allies in your aura create dim light, and you get a +1 status bonus to reflex saves and acrobatics checks, and can step as a free action once per round. When any of you uses move actions, your strikes deal 2 additional fire damage until the end of your next turn. At level 12, the bonuses to reflex saves and acrobatic checks go to +2. Your strikes gain the Flaming Rune instead of just a +2 to fire damage. And this is really similar to level 12 Air Stance, only you get it earlier, it just upgrades itself. So they're pretty equivalent, really. Just nice kind of that you can choose it sooner if you want to. Level 8, 3 actions overflow, one of my favorite AoEs, early on at least, for any of the gates, Solar Detonation. You cause an explosion of flames in a 20-foot burst within 60 feet of you. All creatures must make a reflex save or take 66, keep in mind that's 68 if you're single gate or if you got the junction, fire damage, and 2d6 vitality damage if they have void healing. So the vitality damage is only if they have void healing, but the fire damage is everybody. On a success, even, the creature is dazzled until the start of your next turn. On a failure, it's blinded, and on a crit failure, it's blinded for a minute, which is brutal. Both damage increase by a d6 every 2 levels. This is great in almost any scenario, but it is truly amazing against any undead or anything with void healing, where you will just slaughter everything. All right, Architect of Flame, level 12, 3 actions overflow. You create a wall of fire within 120 feet. Your version actually gets a little more versatile options than the regular wall of fire normally does, and you can sustain it up to a minute. The damage increases by a d6 every 3 character levels. Wall of fire is nice. It doesn't control like a lot of the other walls necessarily, because you can't go through it, but it still hurts a lot. It's a nice damage option. Furnace Form, level 12, 2 actions. You gain the Fiery Body spell benefits, except you can't use Ignition, which is fine. You got your Elemental Blast to do better anyway. You can sustain it up to 1 minute, and when you do, you get to fly up to half your fly speed. Your Fire Elemental Blasts do get 1 extra damage die with this, which is also really, really nice. So, something to consider if you want to buff yourself, and you probably do, as fire. Walk Through the Conflagration. Level 14, 2 actions overflow. You teleport up to 120 feet away, but you have to appear near an open flame or a creature that's taking persistent fire damage. Either before or after you teleport, you can deal 46 damage with a basic reflex save to all creatures within 5 feet emanation of yourself. So if you're being surrounded, this is a nice way to get out. If you don't have an open flame or somebody burning, this is worthless, which is why I hate it. It sounds so good, the promise is so strong, and then it's like, but the condition is going to rarely happen, so good luck with that. All Shall End in Flames. Level 18, 3 actions overflow. A 30-foot burst within 500 feet or a 30-foot emanation explodes with flames, dealing 13d6, which is about 45, damage on average with a basic reflex save to all creatures. Any creatures reduced to 0 hit points instantly die and turn to ash. If you die, however, you get to come back with 2 times your level in hit points. So just 36 hit points. Cool. While the resurrection thing is odd, it can actually be really useful if you're at low hit points and don't want to go to the dying mode. Just boom, hurt everybody else around you and come on back. This does go up to 15d6 damage, by the way, at level 20. And finally, Ignite the Sun. Level 18, 2 actions. You create a mini sun in a 5-foot burst within 500 feet. That is some crazy range. A creature takes 7d6 fire damage anytime the mini sun passes through it with a basic reflex save. A creature can only take this damage once per round, but it's still good. The sun sheds bright light in 500 feet. This is sunlight for vulnerability reasons for creatures. This can be sustained up to a minute. Once per round, when you sustain it, you can increase the size of the thing by 5 feet and then fly it 30 feet, even moving through creatures, forcing them to make the save. Also, you and every ally within the sun's massive 500-foot range for its bright light deal 1d6 fire damage with all strikes, spells that deal fire damage, and impulses that deal fire damage, except this one. You're just bumping up the damage. This is not cumulative with multiple suns, however, and yes, it would be possible to get multiple suns out depending on your ability to sustain for free, and yeah, you can get 2 to potentially even 3 out, which is kind of nuts. Did you want to aid your allies or control the battlefield? How about make yourself difficult to take down? Then you want to ignore this gate. If you're taking this gate, it's because you want to burn everything to the ground. There are a few things here that are survivability. Yes, some ways to get out of harm. There's a terrible teleport, but there's also a decent teleport. What's strange is that despite being the damage gate, the level 1 impulses are pretty terrible, and you really have to get to level 4 before you get anything of real value for dealing damage. I will say that the impulse junction here does help a lot with your damage, moving all those damage die up. Most damage die you have, by the way, are d6s, so getting them all to d8s is really nice. On average, that's 1 damage per dice, but it is nice. It's much better to roll a bunch of d8s than d6s. The aura junction would be great if you were in melee, but honestly, you probably don't want creatures coming up to you very often because you don't have any survivability other than 1 reaction teleport, and that's not going to feel great. I will say that it does have probably the best skill junction because Intimidation is already very, very good, and Intimidating Glare is necessary to take to make Intimidation good, pretty much. So take that if you want. You're going to stay out of range and try to shoot from distance and blow things up. Maybe you want to take Intimidation to debuff people. That could be a great choice to go with high charisma. As a standalone gate, this really just isn't exciting, though. It's not a trap by any means. You can be the best minion destroyer in the party, but that's kind of all you're going to be. One thing I want to say that it really isn't playing into my rankings is that fire is possibly one of, if not the best option to take as a second gate. At level, say, 5 or 9. You can take Solar Detonation as an amazing AoE. You take Volcanic Escape if you're going to get hit and you want a quick way to get out. You just want to fill in the AoE damage gaps of all of the other gates. This is really the way to go for a secondary, but as a primary, it's just not good. That's why this, to me, is a C gate. Even though fire is all about AoE damage, it certainly isn't the only AoE damage gate, so let's take a look at metal. Elemental Blast is a range of 30 feet, deals 1d8 piercing or slashing damage. Your Impulse Junction is that acid, electricity, or piercing damage. You choose one. Any melee attacks against you, the attacker takes damage equal to half your level, minimum 1, from hitting you. Your Critical Blast deals 1d6 persistent bleed damage or 1d6 persistent non-typed damage if they're made of metal, so you can still hurt metal creatures. Your elemental resistances are electricity and metal. Your Aura Junction, enemies take a -1 penalty to attacks with metal weapons and have a -1 to their AC if they're wearing metal armor, so very, very specific. And Skill Junction, Crafting, and Quick Repair, which can be really nice if you want to lean into intelligence. Let's look at our feats. Flash Forward, level 1, 2 actions. You can create any weapon or adventuring gear you can think of, but it's got to be entirely made of metal. If you want to create more than one, then anything you had from before, you have to make a DC 5 flat check, or they're going to go away. Otherwise, they'll last for 10 minutes. Magnetic Pinions, level 1, 3 actions overflow. You fire metal pinions at up to 3 targets within 60 feet. So they don't have to be anywhere near each other, just any 3 targets. You get a +1 to your attack rolls if the creature is wearing metal or is made of metal. They deal 1d4 piercing and 1d4 bludgeoning damage, and they count as 3 attacks for your multiple attack penalty, but that's probably not a big deal since you just used 3 actions doing it. And the multiple attack penalty applies after all of your attack rolls. One of the best level 1 damage impulses for AoE. The damage goes up by 1d4 each every 2 levels, so it actually holds up okay because essentially you're going up by 1d8 every level to 3 creatures. It's really not bad. Metal Carapace, level 1, 1 action. This is metal versions of the armor, only they get a version of armor that is +3 to AC with a +2 from Dex, with a +2 strength requirement, and only a -5 to speed, so you're not going to slow down, but your AC is not going to be as high. Now you can choose to put a shield on as part of this, and you probably should, and that shield hand can still be used to make impulses, so that's nice. This lasts for 10 minutes unless you dismiss it, and the stats of the shield go up as you level up, but your stats of the armor don't, and you're never going to gain like that bulwark ability, things like that. Shard Strike, level 1, 2 actions. You fire shards or spines. Shards are in a 15-foot cone, dealing 1d6 slashing to every creature on a basic reflex save, plus 1d6 bleed on a crit fail. Spines are in a 30-foot line, dealing 1d6 piercing damage on a basic reflex save, and making crit failures clumsy 1. Nice flexibility, and the damage goes up by 1d6 every 2 levels, but it's not a ton of damage. Magnetic Field, we're up at level 4 now for 1 action, and this is a stance. You can either push metal creatures / those wearing metal towards or away from you. This really just determines for those specific creatures if your aura is difficult terrain when they're coming in or going out. Very limited because it requires metal creatures or those in metal armor. Plate in Treasure, level 4, 1 action. This lets you use Clad in Metal spell on an object that you're holding or wearing. This really just gives you access to rare metal types like cold iron. This is useful because it applies to the metal that you do with all your impulses. So if you need to harm fake creatures, for instance, this can be really, really useful. Consume Power, level 6, a reaction. When you take, specifically, acid, fire, electricity, or sonic damage, you gain resistance to it equal to your level, but only for one type at a time. If this prevents damage, you get a boost in the damage of your next metal impulse equal to half your level. The damage boost is nice, but the 4 elements are the only thing you can use this against, so decide if that's going to come up a lot, I guess. Scrap Barricade, level 6, 3 actions, Overflow. You create a straight metal wall 30 feet long by 15 feet high. If any section is destroyed, the whole thing comes down, but creatures adjacent to it do have to make a reflex save when it comes down or take some damage. That's 2d6 damage, by the way. This lasts until the end of your next turn, but can be sustained up to a minute. It's nice to have some control, even if it's not as good as some of the other walls. Conductive Sphere, level 8, 2 actions. You create a floating magnetic sphere that gives elemental resistance and shock rune to adjacent allies. When you summon or sustain it the first time, you can either fly it 20 feet or deal 1d12 electricity damage with a basic reflex save against an adjacent enemy. This damage goes up by 1d12 every 3 levels. Do not do this for the damage. Just do it if you want to help adjacent allies, but even that's not a huge win here. Rust Wretch, level 8, 2 actions, Overflow. You spew rust in a 30-foot cone, dealing 4d10 slashing on a basic fortitude save, with 2d4 persistent slashing damage for metal creatures that fail. So really good against metal creatures, but 4d10 is not bad against anybody. Every 2 levels, the initial goes up by 1d10, and the persistent damage goes up by a d4. So even against non-metal creatures, this is still a decent damage, and 1d10 every 2 levels is actually pretty nice. Rain of Razors, level 12, 3 actions, Overflow. Metal rains from the sky in a 20-foot burst within 60 feet, dealing 9d6 slashing damage with a basic reflex save. The terrain in the area becomes hazardous, dealing 3 slashing damage for each square. Every 2 levels, the initial damage goes up by d6, and the hazardous by 1. A 20-foot burst is a pretty good area, so if somebody's centered there, they're going to have to take a lot of damage just to get out of here. So Rain of Razors is not bad at all. It's pretty decent AoE. Shatter Shield, level 12, 1 action, and this is a stance. 4 plates hover around, giving allies +1 to AC when they're in your aura. When a boosted ally takes any physical damage, one of the plates can take damage first, which it can take up to 5 at the beginning. That'll increase over levels, passing excess damage through once the plate is destroyed. You can replenish a shield for 1 action, and the hardness goes up by 1 every 2 levels. So some nice AC, and then some damage taking for allies does feel pretty nice here. Alloy Flesh and Steel, level 14, 2 actions. You gain the effects of the Ferrous Form spell, mostly. This is a solid defensive spell against physical damage. This lasts until the end of your next turn, unless you sustain it up to a minute. When you sustain, you can raise a shield if you're holding one for free, and you probably should be. While active, Your metal elemental blasts do 1 extra damage die, which is always nice. And once you do let it end, you can't use it again for 1 hour. So you're going to want to keep it going once you've got it going. And now we're up to level 18. Beasts of Slumbering Steel. Level 18, 3 actions. You conjure metal mounts for the entire team. These are very fast. They're either 60-foot ground mounts or 30-foot flying mounts, or they have a 30-foot flying speed or a 60-foot swim speed. They last for a minute unless you're in exploration mode, where they last for an hour. Very cool for a lot of setup. If your team's into using mounts and they don't already have them for some reason, this can be a great way to do it because you never have to worry about your mount truly dying. You can just summon them again. And finally, Hell of a Million Needles. Level 18, 3 actions, overflow. You create a 30-foot cube within 500 feet that explodes in spines. Now keep in mind, a 30-foot cube is 30 foot in all directions, including up. This deals 13 d6 piercing damage on the basic reflex save. Any creature that fails becomes impaled and immobilized. The escape DC is equal to your class DC, so it's not even easy to escape. On a crit fail, you're also off guard while this is going on. While this lasts 1 round, you can sustain it up to a minute. When you sustain it, you get to force every creature in the area to make a reflex save against 3d12 electricity damage, and the whole thing is hazardous terrain, dealing 6 damage per square when you're trying to leave. This is a crazy damage explosion, and it sucks to be in it. It sucks to leave. This is just hard for anybody to deal with. Metal is really an interesting one. I went in expecting it to be heavily defensive, but I found that while some of it's defensive, it's really more of an AoE damage class or damage gate, even compared to fire. It has the occasional control, but that's really, really limited, and has very niche defensive options here for your allies. The problem is that, while some of its impulses are really solid and even quite good, especially some of the AoE, they're mixed in with impulses that are very specific and only affect metal creatures or creatures wearing metal armor, which is really frustrating that they've limited it so much, so it makes it more niche. Then there's your impulse junction, which is terribly weak, dealing some return damage of a certain type you choose. I mean, compare it to something like air, where you just get to move a ton every turn for free. It's not even in the same genre. And the impulse junction isn't even the worst of it, because then you've got the aura junction, which only affects a tiny percentage of enemy creatures anyway. The elemental blast is poor because so many creatures have resistance to physical damage. The resistances and critical blast are also not good. The skill junction is fine, but you have to go heavy in intelligence for it to matter. Honestly, gosh, I was really close to giving this a D. I was so close to giving it a D. But it does have some great AoE damage potential and the occasional thing outside of that that's useful. Because it has the occasional support to add in to just the AoE damage, and the AoE damage can be solid, I'm going to move it up to a C, but it's lucky it got there. Would I take this over fire? I don't know, maybe, but I probably wouldn't make either one my starting point. So those two were a little rough. Let's hope things pick up with water. Elemental Blast is range of 30, deals 1d8 cold or bludgeoning. Your impulse junction is that after the effects of an impulse go off, you can move one creature involved in the impulse either 5 feet in any direction or 10 feet if they're in water, but not into the air, and it must be a willing creature or have failed the save against that impulse or been hit by that impulse. So you still get to move creatures a lot. And yes, this is any horizontal direction, which means they could potentially be moved into hazards. Your critical blast is 2 splash damage per damage die of the same type, which is very unique. Elemental resistances are against fire and water. Your aura junction is non-magical fires are extinguished and allies gain fire resistance in your aura. Your skill junction is athletics with underwater marauder, which in a water campaign is great, otherwise is pretty useless. Then get into your feats. Deflecting wave, level 1 reaction. When you would take acid fire, bludgeoning, or slashing damage from a creature or effect, you can blunt the damage. You gain resistance to the damage equal to your level for bludgeoning or slashing, or twice your level for fire or acid. All of this is good. Yes, acid and fire are less likely, but double the resistance is great, and bludgeoning and slashing will come up all the time. Ocean's Balm, level 1, 1 action. You touch a willing creature to restore 1d8 hit points and give it resistance to fire damage for 1 minute. If it's on fire, it gets to make a flat check, as it normally would at the end of its turn, to try to get rid of that. Only you get to really boost it, so maybe the DC will only be 5 or 10, depending on the GM. The target is then immune to Ocean Balm for 10 minutes, but the healing goes up by 1d8 and the resistance by 1 for every 2 levels. So it does give you a nice heal option. You're just only serving it out to every creature once per combat. Tidal Hands, level 1, 2 actions, overflow. You create a 30-foot, either one 30-foot cone or 2 15-foot cones of water. The two cones can't overlap. Any creature in the areas must make a basic reflex save against 1d8 bludgeoning damage. On a crit fail, they are pushed 5 feet. The damage goes up by 1d8 every 2 levels, so at least it scales pretty decently well, and being able to do either one big cone or 2 smaller cones can actually be very fitting for different scenarios. Winter's Clutch, level 1/2 actions. You create a 10-foot burst within 60 feet of snow. Creatures in the area must make a basic reflex save against 2d4 cold damage. The ground becomes difficult terrain unless the snow is melted, and the damage goes up by 1d4 every 2 levels. So not a ton of damage, and the area is not big, but for level 1, it's not bad. It's just not going to scale well. Return to the Sea, level 4, 2 actions. You give a willing creature within 30 feet the effects of the Feet to Fin spell, which isn't great, but you can see it here. But they also get to breathe while underwater, which is missing from the Feet to Fin spell, and get a +1 bonus to AC and saves against aquatic and water creatures. Its attacks also don't get the usual problems from fighting underwater, like bludgeoning and slashing. Normally have -2 penalties to hit. They won't have that. At level 6, you can target the whole party. So if you're in a water campaign or you think you're ever going to be in water, this can be fantastic. Winter Sleet, level 4, 1 action stance. Your aura creates a thin layer of ice on the ground. Creatures attempting to move through it must succeed on a basic reflex save with a -2 penalty or fall prone. Stepping or crawling ignores this, but they're not going to want to step or crawl. You can cause a creature in the aura to be slowed 1 for a turn if you crit against it or it critically fails against one of your impulses. So like if you elemental blast somebody within your aura while they're standing on the ice, great, they're going to be slowed 1 as well. Adding to the fact that they can't go anywhere, this is really going to hurt them. Driving Rain, level 6, 3 actions overflow. You create a 15-foot burst of damage and concealment. Creatures in the area get a basic reflex save against 3d8 bludgeoning. For level 6 isn't terrible. And the damage goes up by d8 every 2 levels, but keep in mind it's also concealment, and that's both directions. So anybody in it is concealed from everybody outside. Everybody outside is concealed from everybody within, which means if you're just going to keep dropping AoEs, or the team is, great. Drop concealment on them and then force them out and walk into whatever other trap you have set up. Torrent in Blood, level 6, 2 actions overflow. A wave of water flows outward in a 30-foot cone. Each creature gets healed for 3d8 hit points and it can attempt a save against a poison or disease they have. The condition doesn't worsen no matter what, because, when you make saves, they can get worse, but not in this. The healing goes up by d8 every 2 levels, and a creature can only be affected once every 10 minutes, but you now have an AoE heal for the party. And, I keep saying this, but there is a feat early on that lets you exclude allies or enemies from certain impulses, so you could exclude enemies and just heal your party. Call the Hurricane, level 8, 2 actions overflow. You expel a 20-foot emanation, or 30-foot if you're in water, of water, dealing 6d8 bludgeoning damage with a basic reflex save against all creatures in the area. So this is 20 feet going out from you. This is big. A creature that fails is pushed 10 feet away or 20 feet on a crit fail. So if you're feeling like too many creatures are getting up to you, just blast them away. Impenetrable Fog, level 8, 3 actions overflow. You create a 10-foot burst of concealing difficult terrain fog. This lasts until the end of your next turn, but can be sustained up to a minute, and every 3 levels, the burst size goes up by 5 feet. What this means is creatures in it not only have this concealment problem, like we talked about with the other impulse, but getting out of it also takes a ton of movement. But it is just that. So decide if this is really important to you about a type of control you want to do, because they can still get out of it. And concealment can be a benefit to them just as much as it can be a harm. Glacial Prison, level 12, 2 actions overflow. You target one creature within 120 feet to make a Fortitude save. Even on a success, it'll be slowed 1 until the end of its next turn. On a fail or crit fail, it'll become frozen in ice. This lasts until the end of your next turn or until a hostile creature makes an attack action against it, but on a crit fail, after it breaks, the creature is slowed 1, which is really, really good. So Glacial Prison is a fantastic single target control ability. Sea Glass Guardians, level 12, 1 action, and it's a stance. Your aura grants UNL allies +1 to AC and saving throws while they're in it. If a protected creature takes a critical hit or critically fails a save from damage and remains above 0, that creature regains 4d8 plus 8 hit points and the impulse ends. The d8s are d12s if you're in water, and the healing goes up by a d8 plus 4 every 3 levels. So this can be a really cool defensive buff for anybody around you. Barrier of Boreal Frost, level 14, 3 actions overflow. You create a wall of ice following the Wall of Ice spell. And the level of that is equal to half your level rounded up, which makes it the same level as would be cast by a spellcaster of your equal level, using their highest spell slot, so this is good. The wall lasts until the end of your next turn, or you can sustain it up to 1 minute. You can see the spell here, Wall of Ice is a very good wall spell. Ride the Tsunami, level 18, 3 actions overflow. A massive wall of water flows forth in a 60-foot cone or 120-foot line. This is 90 or 180 feet if you're in water when you do it. Each creature in the area makes a basic reflex save against 10d10 bludgeoning damage and gets pushed 20 feet on a failure or 40 feet on a crit failure. Small objects also get pushed to the edge of the water, and after the damage happens, you get to swim anywhere in the area you want to, so you get a little movement along with the damage. Usurp the Lunar Rains, level 18, 3 actions overflow. You mess with the moon to create 2 of 4 options in a 50-foot square within 500 feet. The 2 you choose happen in order that I'm going to list them, so if you chose like the 2nd and the 4th, they're going to happen in order of 2 then 4. So what are these? First, Flood. You fill the area with water. Second, Control. You raise or lower water in the area 10 feet. Modulate. Make the area difficult terrain or remove difficult terrain in the area. And Slow. Any creature with the water trait in the area must make a Fortitude save or be slowed 1 or slowed 2 on a crit fail. Very specific type of impulse that I don't know I love. So other than that though, as you can see, water leaned into the healing side of the elements pretty hard, with 3 feats focused on healing. You can act as the primary healer for the party, honestly, with this gate. But on top of that, there are good AoE options, some damage impulses, solid control impulses that lean heavily into manipulating concealment. So not standard control, and except for the one that can prison somebody in ice. And even some non-healing support impulses to aid your allies as well. The big miss here is lack of survivability, which is disappointing because considering the 30-foot elemental blast range, you really have a hard time getting that same kind of distance that air and fire do. Speaking of elemental blasts, though, it may have a low range, but the options of bludgeoning or cold are decent options. The impulse junction is useful. 5 feet doesn't sound like a lot, but when you can move allies every time or move enemies, you can create distance for your allies or help with flanking purposes, so that's kind of nice. The other junctions I just don't love as much. The crit with splash damage is unique, but I don't think it's terribly useful. The aura junction definition is somewhat situational, and the skill junction is great, but I don't think it's a lot to build on unless you're in a water campaign. Even with a few lacking areas, I do think water is a solid B. It kind of has that same feeling to me as air, as it does a lot of things well. It's just got some pieces missing that I think are critical for an A. Air and water are almost kind of opposite sides of the coin in many ways, but both are still strong. Again, it does share what I believe to be the strongest composite feat in my mind with air, so if you're going to go composite route, I don't think you'll be upset to do a combo of air and water. But that doesn't change its rank. Time for our final gate, Wood. I promise though, it's not least. The Elemental Blast has a range of 30 feet, deals 1d6 bludgeoning or vitality, vitality being very rarely resisted. The Impulse Junction, you gain temporary hit points equal to your level until the start of your next turn, which is really nice. That's a good amount of temp HP. Your Gate Junctions, Critical Blast. If the target is on a surface or surface adjacent, meaning it's up against a wall or standing on something, whatever, then it's immobilized as vines kind of wrap around it. It's just a DC 10 athletics to get rid of it, but that's still forcing an action, which means you're taking away an action from a creature anytime you critically hit them with an Elemental Blast. Elemental Resistance is against poison and wood. The Aura Junction, allies starting their turn in the aura get 1 temporary hit point until the start of your next turn, 2 at 10 or 3 at 15, which is just not a lot. And then your Skill Junction is Survival with Terrain Expertise. So what are our feats? At level 1, we've got Fresh Produce. For an action, you create a piece of healing fruit in your hand that does 1d4 plus 1 healing, and it gives +2 void resistance to anybody who eats it. The resistance lasts for 10 minutes, during which the creature is full and cannot eat another piece of fruit. The healing goes up by a d4 plus 5 every 2 levels, which is a nice raise in healing, honestly. And the void resistance goes up by 2. However, if you create it and it isn't eaten by the start of your next turn, it will wither away. So you do have to feed it to somebody pretty quickly, which is kind of the challenge here. Hail of Splinters, level 1, 2 actions overflow. You create a 30-foot cone of flying splinters that deal 1d4 piercing and 1d4 persistent bleed damage against a basic reflex save to every creature in the area. Both damage goes up by a d4 every 2 levels, by the way, so it ends up being a pretty nasty cone of damage. Hardwood Armor, level 1, 1 action. You cover yourself in wood armor that's got the same stats as the metal armor we talked about, including getting a shield, this time wood instead of steel. That also improves every so many levels, every 3 in this case, and it's the shield again that improves, not the armor. So very similar to the metal armor. Good, but not as good as earth, in my opinion. Timber Sentinel, level 1, 2 actions. You summon a protector tree, spell you can see here, within 30 feet, with a spell level equal to half your level rounded up, so using a maximum spell level for a creature if they're using spell slots for it. At level 1, though, the tree has 10 AC and 10 hit points, and it takes damage for your adjacent allies. So if you got it next to somebody and they get hit, instead the tree takes the damage, and they don't. Here's the crazy part. You can do this infinitely, right? This is, again, I try to bring this up, but you can keep creating these trees and protecting your allies. What's more is, if you create a tree, and before that tree goes away or anything, before it's destroyed, you can create another tree. Well, the first tree doesn't protect anymore. It's now a normal tree. You can create a forest at level 1. So no more worry about deforestation in the world, I guess. Fantastic. Ravel the Thorns, level 4, 1 action stance. Your aura reduces the movement speed of any creature starting in it by 10 feet. Also, any creature moving through it takes 2 piercing damage per square they move through, or 4 if it's on soil or in water, which is probably common enough. If you move, however, it disappears while you're moving, and then when you stop moving, it comes back again. So that's actually kind of useful. The damage only goes up by 1, though, for every 4 levels, and that's all that changes, so limited. Tumbling Lumber, level 4, 2 actions. Logs fly out in a 10-foot wide, 30-foot long line. This removes non-magical difficult terrain, but it's nothing to greater difficult terrain, and all creatures in line must make a basic reflex save against 2d8 bludgeoning, which is not great for level 4, but it's something. On a fail, the creature is pushed out of the way of the line of logs. On a crit fail, they are knocked prone. Dash of Herbs, level 6, 2 actions. You can target a living creature within 30 feet to regain 2d8 plus 4 hit points and attempt a new save against the confused, a disease, poison, or the sickened condition, or an injury. If you choose injury, by the way, then the healing dice go up from d8s to d10s, because that's all injury means, is just from being hurt. The creature's then immune for 10 minutes. You can just add the herbs to food, however, that everybody's going to sit down and eat for up to 6 people, and they all get the effects. And the healing goes up by a d8 every 2 levels. Wooden Palisade, level 6, 3 actions overflow. You create a 30-foot long, 20-foot high wooden wall, and it importantly has a ledge on one side below the top. And there are ladders that lead up to the ledge, which means you and your allies now have a wall that they can get up and sit on near the top of, have partial cover, and fire down at enemies below for 3 actions, which is fantastic. Drifting Pollen, level 8, 1 action stance. Your aura now sickens. Any creature in the area when it starts or that enters the area or ends its turn there must make a fortitude save. On a failure, it's sickened 1 and 2 on a crit failure, and dazzled while sickened. They only make 1 save per round, and if they have it already, they don't make another save. But this is a gross, crippling set of things to have. Sickened is already worse than frightened and doesn't go away on its own because you have to spend actions to get rid of it, and dazzle on top of sickened, that's just debilitating. Sanguivalent Roots, I know I said that right. Level 8, 3 actions, overflow. You create a 15-foot burst of blood-sucking roots within 120 feet. All enemies in the area must make a basic fortitude save against 3d6 piercing damage. Each time the impulse deals damage, all allies in the area gain hit points equal to half the damage dealt to the most damaged enemy. If there are any creatures with void healing in the area, they also take damage equal to the health the allies gained. This may not be a lot of damage, but it's a swing, right? You're dealing damage while healing allies, and a 15-foot burst is pretty decent. You can just drop it right on yourself because the damage only affects enemies. Also, you can keep it there and sustain it for a minute, meaning you can just beg enemies to try to walk in and take free damage and heal your allies, just setting up a nice little barrier for yourselves. Hedge Maze, level 12, 3 actions overflow. You create 10 by 15 by 15 foot high ledges in a 30-foot square within 120 feet. These create cover, are difficult terrain, and have an increased climb DC, DC 15. Also, if you do this in exploration mode, you can instead make a cozy cabin, spell here, which creates a nice little safe place for you all to rest for the night. Witchwood Seed, level 12, 2 actions overflow. You touch an enemy, so this is actually up close, and it has to make a fortitude save against 5d10 piercing damage. On a crit success, nothing happens. On a success, they take a movement speed penalty. On a fail or crit fail, they become clumsy 2 and immobilized. The damage increases by a d10 every 4 levels, so not a lot of d10, but you're probably here for the immobilization and clumsy. Orchard's Endurance, level 14, 1 action stance. You and your allies in the aura have resistance 5 to bludgeoning and piercing damage, 2 very common types. Any save any of you makes against persistent bleed, you get advantage on the roll. The resistance increases by 2 at 18th level. So nice resistance, but that's really what you're here for, is to give everybody some nice bludgeoning and piercing resistance. Rouse the Forest Fury, level 18, 3 actions overflow. You create 3 large trees within 500 feet that have to be at least 15 feet apart. These have solid stats, including 200 hit points. When they appear, each can make an attack using your attack modifier, meaning your impulse attack modifier, and these could be melee or ranged attacks. If they hit with a melee attack, they grapple the creature as well. This ends at the end of your next turn, but can be sustained, and when you sustain, a tree can make an attack. Do keep in mind the attacks from the trees all have the multiple attack penalty applied in order as you use them, but still, this is a very strong tactical tool to use on the battlefield, and if any trees take any damage from any enemies, meaning any targeted damage, well great, that just is damage your team didn't take. Fantastic. And finally, our last impulse for the video is Turn the Wheel of Seasons. Level 18, 3 actions overflow. You trigger a 4-round impulse moving through the seasons, but you get to choose which season it starts at. This affects a 100-foot cube within 1,000 feet of you, so this is truly ridiculously massive. Spring, allies gain 20 temporary hit points. This lasts until the season change, and that'll be common. Any dying ally gets a recovery check immediately, but can't get worse than success, which is awesome, so you can't make them dying worse. Summer, enemies must attempt a reflex save, becoming dazzled on a success or blinded on a failure until season change. Fall, everything in the area is concealed, and enemies are slowed 1 unless they succeed a fort save until season change. And winter, enemies must make a basic reflex save against 5d6 cold damage. Failed save adds 2d6 persistent cold damage, which doesn't just go away. It's persistent until they succeed a save. I told you it wasn't least. I like wood. This is like water. It has great support, including great healing. In fact, a considerable amount of healing. Might even have better healing than water. Solid AoE damage at certain points. Great control. You've got, through grabbing or walls or whatever. One of the major differences between wood and water, which I do think is very similar as gates go, is that wood has survivability where water just doesn't have that survivability. While both do have that shorter 30-foot range elemental blast, wood actually gets armor at level 1, water really doesn't get that. The wood aura junction, skill junction and elemental resistance aren't anything special though. The critical blast is solid, providing immobilization effect, and that really kicks off the list of feats that are about controlling enemy movement either by placing things in the way or immobilizing them. This is the kind of control on the battlefield that tacticians really love to have because they can really define where everybody's going to be stuck the entire battle. For all those reasons, I believe that wood is a step above water and it lands along earth as an A. If you're playing a game that will focus on, say, just levels 1 through 3, this is S tier solely because of the ridiculous power of Timber Sentinel, which is kind of broken. Also, many of the other gates have at least one level where both feats just don't impress, but the closest we get with wood is level 12, and even in that case, depending on your playstyle, this could still be a good addition. It's just absolutely not a must-pick element, but if you haven't taken a good look at wood yet, you really should. Before we leave off for today, I want to give a quick thought about multi-gate builds. You might think that because wood and earth both got A's from me, they must be the best pick when you put them together. However, that's just not the case. This is why I don't want to get into these conversations too much because they're difficult to compare multi-gate builds against each other. I will throw out there that I think both Metal and Fire are amazing as second gates because they provide a lot of AoE damage, even if they don't provide much else. Both water and wood can be great if you want to be a strong healer. Air plus water is great if you want to take that amazing composite impulse feat. There are other good composite feats though. So yes, I stand by my rankings if you're going to go single gate through the entire game, but I highly recommend you look at least dual gate because I do think dual gate possibilities are maybe the strongest type of kineticists. Just make sure that you do few enough that you can get some of the really strong impulse junctions. The Kineticist is just plain cool in this system. Very unique in what it does, not martial, not caster, lives in this very interesting place, can play almost any role. I have yet to run a game where at least one person doesn't play it. There's honestly no way to go wrong that I know of as far as playstyle goes. just don't overlook wood and metal simply because they aren't kind of the standard elements you think of. Are you a fire kineticist that's just now cursing my very existence? Maybe you think Woodgate is a joke and nobody needs those defensive trees? Let me know in the comments, and as always, adventure on.